There you go.
Okay. And then in terms of where the climate hubs function, so if we look at kind of foundational research, applied research, and then outreach and extension, the hubs function in this green box, which is packaging and developing a lot of the great foundational research, applied research happening either at USDA or at other agencies, and then disseminating that, figuring out what is it that cooperative extension and our partners and stakeholders really need. But an important part of that is listening to our stakeholders and engaging with them. And of course, our stakeholders also include USDA agencies, other federal agencies, land-grant universities, farmers, rangers, foresters, rural communities. And so, you know, the hubs operate kind of in this bottom part of the circle. Some of them do their own applied research through data synthesis or through tool technology development. But, you know, where they really operate best is really convening stakeholders and listening to them so that we can make sure the products that are delivered out of USDA are actually useful, usable, and used. And then again, this is kind of a schematic of how we work through the process of co-production, and that involves identifying, who is it that we need to serve, building partnerships with them, co-exploring need, co-developing a solution. Then of course that we have to evaluate. We go back to identifying those actors in kind of a circle. And in terms of the work streams, we work through three main themes in our work. The first is science and data synthesis. So that involves providing input to the National Climate Assessment. And so for the fourth National Climate Assessment, each of the hubs providing kind of a regional snapshot of climate risks and vulnerabilities related to ag and natural resources. And for this forthcoming National Climate Assessment, for the fifth slate to come out in 2023, many of them are either chapter lead authors, so providing leadership to the individual chapters, or authors. So that's kind of one way we provide science and data synthesis in the climate community. Our second work stream is technology, tool development, and support. And then third is outreach, convening, and training. And the rest of this presentation will be kind of a wild ride through a lot of our products and exciting opportunities, I think, for you all to engage with us. So let's go. But before I go into some of the examples, we can't do all of the work ourselves. A lot of if you look at the hub staffing, it's probably 2 FTEs and a lot of additional staff. So we can't do all of this alone. We do this through partnership and collaboration. So first, as I mentioned, the hubs are connectors. We connect a wide range of USDA partners, including federal and state agencies, extension, and tribes. We coordinate with other regional climate change organizations. You may be familiar with the USGS Climate Adaptation Science Centers, or the CASC. There's also the NOAA RESA program, the Regional Integrated Sciences and Assessments Program. There's also through NOAA NIDIS, the National Integrated Drought Information System, the Drought Early Warning System. So we coordinate and we really find ways to work together at the regional scale to deliver solutions on the ground. And finally, we collaborate and co-produce climate information and resources to ultimately support resilient landscapes and resilient communities. So in terms of science and data synthesis, I do want to read this stat that I pulled out. So since 2014, when the hubs were first formed, they've actually published over 541 peer-reviewed scientific papers and over 1,100 pieces of gray literature. And the gray literature stat is really important because those fact sheets, blogs, and news articles really help to translate that complex scientific information into accessible and usable resources that our stakeholders ask for and that they actually use based off of the scientific publications. And so from the statistics, you can see the hubs are operating at a really interesting place where they are able to provide scientific contributions to the literature, just kind of looking at existing data and synthesizing what's available, but also translating existing science into usable forms by our stakeholders. I did this picture on the left as an example of the climate assessments that they produce for the 4th National Climate Assessment, and those are available online for all of our 10 Climate Hub regions. This image on the right shows an example web page from our Northwest Climate Hub where they pulled together various resources and research on biofuel resources. And then this paper that's on the bottom right is, I'll delve into some of the details, but it's looking at the economic dimensions of soil health, which I think you may find interesting. So this project on the economic dimensions of soil health is actually led out of our Northeast Climate Hub. And they were looking at long-term data sets from various sources, including the Long-Term Agroecosystem Research Site, or LTAR, through ARS, and also other places to really evaluate the economics of both no-till and cover crops. And really they saw that looking at long-term economic outcomes was really important to determining the potential incentives for farmers. Should be no surprise. They also found that understanding the motivations for adopting proper soil health management strategies could increase adoption. In terms of some of the findings, they found that research on the economic value and potential external benefits of cover crops actually limited, and some of their future research directions included continuing to convene and bring together economists, soil conservation experts, agronomists, and other scientists, continuing to aggregate different types of data sets at the county level, also satellite-based data to cover a wider geographical area, but also looking at non-market valuation techniques to estimate the societal external contributions, such as ecosystem services from various soil health practices. And then that paper is listed below. Another interesting example from our climate hubs working with APHIS is around vesicular stomatitis virus, or VSV. So I'm not a horse or equine expert, but I thought this research was really interesting. VSV is essentially an insect-borne disease that can cause painful lesions in living animals. But our Northern Plains Climate Hub worked with APHIS to provide a synthesis of different management strategies and science to reduce VSV, really delivering useful and usable information to equine veterinarians and owners. And this image in the top right shows kind of an image they showed in terms of kind of the different management techniques, looking from the animal to the shelter to the barnyard and to the environment. Our Southwest Climate Hub also integrated climate and hydrology information into VSV analyses, and they found that temperature was associated with higher incidence of VS in the western U.S., and that paper is listed below. But just an example of how we're working across USDA in various topical areas that you may not think of in terms of related to climate, but where we're bringing in our expertise into their sphere. So then in terms of tools and technology, our second work stream, since our inception in 2014, we've worked on the development of over 25 climate-based, web-based tools. And I'll go over 3 of our most used tools here in this presentation. The first is the adaptation workbook, the second is the GraphCast, and the third is the AgRisk viewer. So the adaptation workbook is the way they describe it is a flexible yet structured adaptation planning process that provides menus that you can pick from, different strategies you can do to achieve a particular outcome. And it really offers different management scenarios to help land managers respond to different climate risks. And there are different adaptation workbooks for different sectors, actually. There's one developed for forests with watersheds, forest carbon management, which I have a slide on, non-forest and wetland conservation, recreation, agriculture, and wildlife management. So a slew of menus for you to choose from. This image in the bottom right shows the adaptation workbook developed for agriculture. It is specific to the Midwest and Northeast, and that helps folks consider short-term adaptive management actions and long-range strategic plans. The image in the middle just shows how the adaptation workbooks, how they operate, kind of defining, assessing, evaluating, identifying, monitoring, and thinking of that as a loop. And then the image on the far right at the top is also kind of a schematic of how the adaptation workbook, thinking about the concept, going from strategies, approaches, tactics, and taking action, depending on those. And then this is a specific example of one of those workbooks for forest carbon management. And it was designed really to help natural resource professionals devise actions to maintain existing carbon stocks or enhance sequestration capacity. And then also looking at the co-benefits with other sustainable management objectives. And so I pulled out one example from the workbook, which is here you can read it, Strategy 6, maintain or enhance existing carbon stocks while retaining the forest character. And then I won't read off some of the example tactics, but you can see those here. And in the workbook, it actually also lists the scientific literature that is behind these tactics, which is good to connect it to the scientific literature. Another example is the Urban Forest Climate and Health Adaptation menu, and that's fairly recent. It was also highlighted in I think a year ago in the White House press release looking at the impact of urban heat. And so this is a really cool new resource. And they also work with the Vibrant Cities Lab to produce this climate and health action guide, really to help maximize those benefits to trees to address report from the Forest Service is listed here in the top right. The second tool I'll talk about, which I think you all may enjoy, called GrassCast, and that was developed out of our Northern Plains Climate Hub located in Fort Collins. And that's really a decision support tool for rangeland managers and ranchers, really asking the question, how much vegetation will be available in the growing season? And so some details, it uses over 30 years of historical data about weather and vegetation growth, and it combines it with seasonal precipitation forecasts to predict if rangelands in individual counties will be either above normal, near normal, or below normal compared to amounts of vegetation for grazing. So I think it's every 2 weeks, GrassCast produces these 3 different maps to show what the rangeland may be like in the upcoming season. Oh, and then to mention, I'll go back. This is also a unique collaboration. This wasn't only just the USDA, but we worked with the National Drought Mitigation Center, University of Arizona, Colorado State, and University of Nebraska-Lincoln. You can see the link to the tool at the bottom. And then this slide I stole from the Northern Plains Climate, kind of showing how they actually figure out GrassCast. And so, I mentioned that one, they use observed weather and forecasted weather. And then they use day-set models to look at evapotranspiration for the growing season. And then they get at greenness for the season. And then they correlate that to pounds per acre of vegetation for the season. So I don't know the exact details of that, but they have been working hard across this Northern Plains and Southern Plains region. They've also expanded, I think, to the whole state of Arizona and covered all of New Mexico. And I think we're hoping that we can expand this to cover further eastern Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, but also just thinking about, can we use GrassCast in areas that we may not consider, even in the Caribbean or in the South? The third tool I'll talk about, the Ag Risk Bureau, which I actually helped develop. It really provides over 30 years of crop insurance data in a more accessible, usable format. And these data are from the USDA Risk Management Agency, or RMA. And Ag Risk Bureau really empowers our producers and the general public to assess their climate risks using this really powerful data set. Essentially, the crop insurance data set provides data on the different crops that were affected by weather or climate-related conditions, such as drought, and it provides the amount of money that were paid out due to that condition. And you can see that these types of data, especially at the county level, could promote adaptation and resilience of both ag systems and rural communities. And then in terms of, we've developed these tools, but if you think about our work streams, I mentioned the first was science and data synthesis. We've produced these tools with amazing long-term data sets. Well, we can also produce science syntheses from these. And so this is just an example of using the crop insurance data in the first 2 panels. The first is looking at the percent of indemnities or payments that are reported as drought. And then the second panel here is the percent of indemnities or payments as hail. And we connected those data to, this one is, the third one is saturated thickness changes over the Ogallala Aquifer. And then the last one is the change in total irrigation water from USGS between 1990 and 2015. And so this is just an example of the type of synthesis we can do, looking at are there any trends between the 2 data sets, and what can we find out by linking USDA data with USGS data? I'm just trying to remember, one of the findings we found was that in the northern Ogallala, so you can see the kind of darker purple, that there's a lot of hail damage, right, which makes sense. And then in the southern Ogallala, there's a lot of drought damage. But we also found that folks may also be expecting hail damage, so they may actually be hedging their bets by taking up more crop insurance than necessary. And we found something similar in the Southern Plains. And so, that could, that's important information, because that may tell you something also about water use and water availability. So just one example of how we've turned kind of a tool into something that was data and science synthesis, provided something to the scientific literature. Another tool I'll talk about here is a feedlot selection tool. That really helps foresters, landowners, and land managers consider climate change when they're thinking about reforestation and afforestation projects, really providing information on where do I plant my seed, after a significant climate event such as a fire. And it, like I said, just helps managers match the planting materials with the planting sites based off of historic, current, and future climate conditions. And then this booklet on the right is actually a guidebook developed out of our Northwest Climate Hub that walks folks through in terms of how to use the feedlot selection tool. And I think it's only developed for the Western U.S. at the moment, which makes sense. And I think there are plans to either expand upon it or at least produce more guidebooks to help folks to use the tool. Kind of going along this kind of forest management aspect, our Northwest and California climate hubs have also produced helpful guidebooks in terms to help small forest landowners really, one, help determine appropriate land management actions, second, find technical support, but also third, understand opportunities to build forest health and resilience. So the middle image here shows the Climate Resilience Guide for small forest landowners in Western Washington. And then the last image is for the Sierra Nevada and Southern Cascade Range. And then I found this one online searching on Climate Hub's website. I'm always searching for a lot of great things our hubs are doing. Another thing our Southwest Climate Hub did was they looked at carbon pools and decision support tools in New Mexico. They partnered with the New Mexico Department of Ag to investigate if a carbon market could serve as a value-added financial option for New Mexico producers. And so I thought this was a really cool project because it encompassed all three of our work streams. The first, science synthesis, so you can see what they were able to accomplish. The second was tool evaluation. They actually looked at all the decision support tools available out there around carbon sequestration, and out of the 73 they evaluated, they found only 5 were actually easy to use and adequate for carbon estimates in New Mexico. And then the last was they did a variety of producer listening sessions, and these were virtual scientist stakeholder conversations. And that also included an in-person meeting at the New Mexico cattle growers meeting. And these two images just shows some of the YouTube videos available where they did these stakeholder listening sessions. So a nice mix of our 3 work streams around a really important and topical item. The hubs have also produced a variety of resources on disaster preparedness. On the left shows a farmstead wildfire preparedness fact sheet developed from our Southern Plains Climate Hub alongside Oklahoma Cooperative Extension. On the top right shows a toolkit developed from our Southwest Climate Hub for assessing and preventing potential damage due to post-fire flooding and related events. And I think it's called the Post-Fire Toolkit. And then this last image in the bottom right shows an image of one commodity guide out of 23 developed from our Southeast Climate Hub. And those 23 commodity guides provide over 1,000 pages of information to help producers prepare for and recover from hurricane events. And the quantity guides cover, here it shows pine forests, they have some for cotton, for tomatoes, fruits, and so there's a variety of really important and helpful information for the Southeast, especially important commodities there. So our third work stream is around outreach, convening, and education. I think this is also where our hubs really excel. And hold on, I just want to find this stat. I can't remember all these. But since the hub's inception in 2014, the staff have reached over 35,000 students and youth, and they've compiled over 59 curricula and educational products. And I think that's really impressive. And these 3 are just some of the examples of these kind of off-the-shelf flexible educational products that, while they were developed for their particular region, they can be used anywhere around the country. The first in the bottom right is from the Southwest Climate Hub. There are these 3 educational modules. One is on climate change in the water cycle, another one is on climate change effects on ag systems, and then the last one is climate change in the carbon cycle. And these 3 were so successful that it was adapted for Alaska. So the middle image shows Alaskan farms on the table. So our Northwest Climate Hub partnered with the Alaska FFA Association to produce this educational model based off of the bottom left for the Southwest Climate Hub. And finally, there's one from the Southern Plains Climate Hub on understanding soil health and watershed function, which has also been used in the Southern Plains, but is potentially being expanded in other areas. Just a snippet of some of the curricula that have been developed with the Climate Hub. And then in terms of peer-to-peer learning, the hubs have also excelled in this. So the first example here is the Drought Learning Network, which is really a knowledge exchange among climate service providers and resource managers. And the main goal here is to gather and share lessons learned from drought events to improve future responses. And the DLN was conceptualized as a framework for stakeholders to share experiences in preparing for, responding to, and recovering from drought. And the DLN was first developed out of our Southwest Climate Hub, and it's also being expanded to the Caribbean. And this is just an example of how the Southwest Drought Learning Network conceptualizes their peer-to-peer learning network with these various subgroups. For example, one is drought in agriculture, one is projections people, Another one is Indigenous collaboration. Then you can see in the middle circle the various resource managers who work together, including tribes, NRCS, FSA, Extension, Bureau of Land Management. And, it's important to get them into a room talking with each other about drought, which is a really important and significant topic for the West, especially. Another example of this peer-to-peer learning network is the Climate Adaptation Fellowship Program, which is developed out of our Northeast Climate Hub, and it pairs producers with extension or crop advisors, and really that helps for them to co-develop various pieces of climate change knowledge and impact, and also good planning decisions related to climate change adaptation. And I believe this year they had over 38 fruit and vegetable, or 40 vegetable and berry growers and advisors, and they started in January 2021. So that's a really great start off to this fellowship program. But these two examples really show the value of the peer-to-peer learning model, which really allows communities, scientists, and decision makers to share their successes with each other to ensure that strategies, policies, and programs meet local needs, but also ensuring that we can also look and see if we can scale and implement climate-smart solutions and ag innovation. And finally, this peer-to-peer learning really allows for cross-sectoral, cross-jurisdictional collaboration and coordination. Another example where the hubs have excelled at outreach are these 360 virtual demonstration projects. And so these are basically virtual field tours. These were developed out of our Northeast Climate Hub, and they provide, I think, over 20 to 30 examples of what folks are actually doing on the ground related to agroforestry, urban forestry, prescribed burning, timber management. And so, of course, during the pandemic, it was difficult to get out of the house, but this is a great way to kind of pretend to plop yourself down in the middle of a field and see what folks are actually doing in response to weather and climate risks, specifically for the Northeast. But a lot of these you could apply to your own field or farm site. And so I highly recommend taking a look at these. There's innovative photography and videos alongside each of the various topics there. And they were produced alongside with Extension and the land-grant universities in the region. Another example, our Northeast Climate Hub, of course, they produced a recent documentary on Delmarva and the Ground for Change. And it follows 3 different family-owned farming operations on the Delmarva Peninsula who are doing really forward-looking practices on soil health and climate change. And so some of the practices include no-till farming, cover crops, subsurface irrigation, rotational grazing, and soil carbon sequestration. And this documentary was actually released to the USDA staff. We had over, I think, 600 online that watched the film premiere with our deputy secretary who did a Q&A with the farmers and the film producer. So it was a really great introduction to why should we care about climate change and its relationship to soil health. And so leaving behind kind of our 3 work streams and kind of broadening out, the hubs have also been focusing on reaching diverse communities, and that also includes underserved communities. And so, we view that as, through the hub's assessments, tools, and technologies, we could identify opportunities to ensure equitable access to USDA research and programs. So one specific example is you can imagine looking at the ag risk viewer, and you can look at hot spots of where there are crop insurance payments, but also are there cold spots of crop insurance payments, and could those cold spots indicate areas where we are not serving producers related to USDA programs, right? And so I think that's a great opportunity for the hub since they're kind of connecting research and programs. The hubs are also a covered program for the Justice 40 initiative. So the Justice 40 initiative comes from the White House, and it's essentially to deliver 40% of climate and clean energy benefits to disadvantaged communities. That's a very broad definition, which includes underserved communities. And another specific example here is a $9 million investment for fiscal year 21 from NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, in Climate Hub and Extension partnerships. And that also includes focus on expanding engagement in underserved areas. And one specific project is on native climate, strengthening the role of climate hubs in Indian country. And that involves the Desert Research Institute with our Southwest and Northern Plains Climate Hub. And I'll briefly cover that NIFA potential pool of funding. And it's through the AFRI program, and it's called the Extension Education and USDA Climate Hubs Partnership. So for FY21, they provided $9 million to really engage Extension, but also engage the Climate Hub to deliver climate-smart solutions. And the goal of this NIFA opportunity is to support projects that really provide effective, translatable, and scalable approaches to address climate change. really linking extension with the climate hub. You know, we realize that extension is really a force multiplier for a lot of the work the hubs are doing, but we also realize that, you know, extension also needs support alongside the hubs. And then I won't read some of these example emphasis areas, but I'll note that we're gearing up for FY22, and many of the hubs are involved in successful letters of intent, and they'll be submitting full grant applications, I think, early October. And so let me just quickly check the time. Okay. I do want to keep broadening out, kind of talk about where the hubs fit within USDA kind of climate strategy. And so I won't read off, you know, what we consider climate smart agriculture. It is from the FAO, but this report was actually in response to the Climate Crisis Executive Order 14008, and it's essentially our mitigation strategy, climate smart ag and forestry strategy. But the point I want to make is that there's actually a role for the climate hubs in this, which is really great, and it's to continue to lower barriers and increase the rate of adoption of climate smart ag and forestry practices. And the report says that the hubs should also help identify opportunities for collaboration with partners to develop the necessary innovations or curate tools and technologies to moderate climate stressors. And so already there is a role for the climate hubs kind of in the mitigation side of USDA's climate strategy. More importantly, the climate adaptation at USDA, so this report on the far right was also requested from the Climate Crisis Executive Order. Each department was required to produce an adaptation resilience action plan. And so I'll just list, you can see here USDA's 5 adaptation actions. And actually number 5, it's actually telling USDA to leverage the USDA Climate Hub support mission area. So it's actually saying, hey guys, you should use the hub in your own work to deliver on climate adaptation. But more importantly, the hubs are actually listed in a lot of the actions. And so I'll just briefly mention in Action 2, which is around adoption and application of climate smart practices. The report notes that a continuing outward-facing role for the hubs, which is to expand USDA's reach with farmers, ranchers, forest landowners, including underserved communities, but also working with NIFA to strengthen cooperative extension as a force multiplier to deliver climate smart practices. And of course, we're already doing that through that NIFA opportunity I mentioned earlier. Action 4, which is around research and development, the plan notes that USDA will work through the hubs, extension, and other means to really understand stakeholder needs and deploy new information, data, practices, tools, and technologies to private landowners and managers for implementation. And of course, the hubs are already doing this, as I mentioned. You know, we listen first, and we're learning from our stakeholders, and we can achieve this through our various work streams. And the final action, which is kind of for USDA itself to use the climate hub, it's more inward-facing, but it's really to provide connection across USDA and the U.S. government on climate change, including NASA and other federal agencies. And I will note that USDA, especially the climate hub, has been a kind of a first stop, for many agencies on what is climate change. And that's a great role for the climate hub. We've also been helping FEMA in their climate adaptation exercise series, which they're going to deliver across all their regions. And we're providing kind of a climate and agriculture and natural resource expertise. And so, I don't need to sell the climate hubs to you. I've already shown you all the great products, but in terms of their value add, the hubs, not only do they link science with programs and managers, they serve as connectors. Second, they help build mutual literacy in climate science and working lands. I showed you a few examples of those kind of youth workforce development modules. Third, they assess climate vulnerabilities, including pre and post disaster. So thinking back to the science syntheses from early on in the presentation. Fourth, they are also providing tested and effective adaptation planning and implementation. So thinking about the adaptation workbook in various sectors. And finally, the hubs continue to build relationships and networks, either in the federal government, state government, rural communities, across the board. But part of that building relationships is to convene folks linking biophysical and socioeconomic expertise. So thinking back to that soil health example, and also integrating community and producer perspectives. And then further opportunities, so using our syntheses tools and outreach materials to help build climate awareness and knowledge. I keep mentioning it that they are connectors, but we really convene and bring partners to the table. And again, most importantly, listen and learn. Third, they're working on enhancing partnerships and collaborative capacity in timely and relevant areas. So, for example, we've seen a lot of interest in soil carbon and agroforestry. And finally, we continue to expand tool and technology development and implementation. So thinking back to the example on grass caps and how can we expand that to other regions. of the country. And so these are just kind of a few lessons learned, which should be no surprise. One is to meet stakeholders where they are, not where you want them to be. And then second, listen first and lead with what's important to them. And finally, find your value add and leverage partnerships to deliver efficient and effective programming and resources. And some of these lessons learned are also from my own experience as a fellow at the Southwest Climate Hub in Las Cruces, New Mexico, especially between 2016 and 2019, when climate change wasn't necessarily popular, but we still delivered the resources that producers needed to really, manage their land and changing climate, whether it be drought, lack of water, we're still connected with them. And so I think the hubs have really built those relationships since 2014, and they're really poised to continue building off of those successes and relationships and engage further with you all here at NASA and the various projects from CMS. And I think that's everything. I think there's lots of time. It's perfect. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry I had too much, but yeah.
We have 20 minutes left. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful audience.
We're a small but very active audience. Okay, so let's see if we have questions online. You can post your questions, comments on the chat box, or you can unmute and direct your question to Julian. We have one first question from Cassandra. She mentions that these tools, the tools that you mentioned, I mean the three of the tools that you mentioned, all seem very informative and useful for stakeholders. Could you speak to the role of stakeholder input in the planning and development of the tools?
Great question. I can speak to the ag risk viewer at least because I'm more familiar with that. So with the ag risk viewer, in terms of the stakeholders who we engaged with, that our main stakeholder at the time was the Risk Management Agency because one, they were a contributor to the hubs, they're a federal partner, and we were using their data. So at that time, we had engaged with them to co-produce this tool, thinking about how can we better serve RMA. And we later learned that the tool is actually being used by other stakeholders, so farmers, ranchers, state agencies. So, we probably should have included them earlier on, but we found out they were using the tool because when the tool was down, they were complaining about it. But by figuring out that they were using it, we looped them in and we asked them, how can we make the tool better for you? And so through that experience, we did loop them in and we continued improving upon the tool. But it was initially just developed between RMA and the climate hubs, kind of as a federal tool, but then we found out it was actually useful to the public. So one specific example I like to talk about is the tool is being used by, I think they call themselves a drought czar in Washington State, and he was looking at whether he should produce a drought declaration for ag sectors in Washington State, and he was looking at historical drought payment and crop insurance payments using our tool. So that's just one specific example of how someone was using it for decision making. For GrassCast, I can say that they have been taking that tool on a roadshow continually, whether it's with the tribes in the Northern Plains or even ranchers and farmers, and figuring out how are you using the tool and how can we make it better. And I did mention that the data were available at the county level, and same with the Ag Risk Bureau, because we know many of our producers operate at that level. So that's already one example of how we've, created a tool to match the interests and wants of our stakeholders. The adaptation workbook, I can speak to that a little bit. They are taking the various workbooks from the different sectors and regions and having workshops and co-developing ways that folks can actually use the workbook in their specific farm or ranch. And there's actually examples on our website showing how folks are using the adaptation workbook. I can't remember the link, but those show examples of what folks are doing. I think one is focused on it's called the Alaskan farm, and looking at how they're doing it, how they're using the workbook on their farm. And there's another one, I think, from Puerto Rico, which is interesting. So there are specific examples of how folks are using the workbook to show others how they're using that in their planning.
Thank you for that, Julian. We have a couple of questions here. Kristen Bird. She asked, and I think this is very important, spatial resolution. For the spatial tools that have been developed, what is the spatial resolution needed to inform the specific management or the decision need?
That's a really good question. That could be a whole nother presentation. And I think, that the spatial resolution is, we can ask first, what is it that, I assume it's probably at the farm or ranch site, which is fairly difficult. But I think if we can't get that specific, we typically like to ask for data at the county level, just because, as you know, USDA has a service center almost every county, and cooperative extension also operates at the county level. So for us, we've typically requested data and tools operate at the county level. And I don't know, you can even imagine for some tools, if we're requesting data from NOAA, it's even difficult to get county level data or to average it over the county level. But that's typically the spatial scale that we operate as. But to related to the earlier question, we always ask first, what is it that you need and what scale? We just don't hope to just create something and then it's not used.
Okay, and we're gonna leave a couple of minutes also, like for people that want to unmute and make their questions, but we have a couple of questions here. Lisa Marie Winham-Myers from USGS, she's a wetlands person. She asks, are you seeing rice farmers or ranchers interested in methane mitigation? And she mentions that there is a CMS project by Ben Ronkel, for example, on rice management for methane reduction while still maintaining crop quality and quantity.
Great question. And Ben was actually one of the organizers for our nature-based climate solutions workshop. I specifically have not heard of interest, at least for rice, but our Southeast Climate Hub, rice is pretty big in eastern Arkansas, western Mississippi. There is an agricultural research service site there where I know they work on rice. I don't know, but I could say that is probably a really important area for our Southeast Climate Hub and Southern Plains Climate Hub to work on that issue with ARS, and maybe even you to think of an interesting project to serve our stakeholders, and given the huge interest and probably a lot of money now with methane with the new bill that was passed actually. And I will mention that each of the hubs actually, so you're looking at this map, they all have their various kind of topical expertise, right? I mentioned half are ARS, half are Forest Service. So some of the Forest Service stations may focus more on forest versus agriculture. So the Southeast Climate Hub is actually located in Raleigh, so pretty far from the Mississippi River, but also there are Forest Service research sites. So they may not be paying attention or focusing right now on methane and rice, but potentially that could be an area where they could move into if that's of interest to you all and others.
Thank you. We have a couple of people that are more like wetlands and ocean people, which is very interesting. Dolores Wesson, she asks, do any of your programs, services, or tools connect with coastal water quality nutrients or algal blooms or dead zones or coastal waters?
Good question. Actually, I should have put that in there. There's one actually from our Southeast Climate Hub. They produced a report on salinization and issues on coastal ag areas, actually. So our Southeast Climate Hub has been working on that. And actually, our Northeast Climate Hub has also been working on kind of coastal flooding issues and salinization, especially on the coast and as it relates to agriculture and rural communities. So actually, yes, I can think of at least 2 regions that have worked on that issue. I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the manual, but I know the Southeast has a manual they prepared for their ag and natural resource stakeholders. It should be on our website.
Perfect.
Email me to remind me.
Okay, we have time now. We have like 10 minutes. Is there any questions from people online or in the phone line that you would like to ask directly to Julianne, or any comment? Usually we have people. Let's see if they... And anyone can unmute yourself. Yeah. Anything? I don't know if, Leslie, you have.
I do, yeah. So I have lots of very interesting things that you covered. One thing I was particularly excited about was your grass cap.
That's what I thought.
And just curious, it's always challenging with those seasonal type projections to communicate uncertainty and how much confidence you have. So curious about how you deal with that, and also how you evaluate success of the forecast, because I think this is really cool. Ideally, you could expand this, but just curious if you have thoughts on those.
Those are both, you hit the nail on the head with those 2 questions. So from what I've seen from GrassCast, and so I haven't worked with the developers of that, In terms of the uncertainty, part of that is why there are 3 maps, and it's very complicated. That's why there's kind of the above normal, near normal, below normal. So that's also already related to the forecast right into the season. So that's why it's already those 3 maps. And to communicate how to use the maps, it is very complicated. If you go to the website, they actually list how to use the maps in like a statement and then to fill in the blank. And so it's very complicated. The way I explained it was probably the easiest way, but once you delve into the data, it is quite complicated. But I think the Northern Plains Climate Hub, by doing this kind of roadshow, working with farmers and ranchers, they've honed the message a little bit. I think related to that certainty, I still think that they want to provide that spread because there is that potential spread. Let's see, your second question about the evaluation. So from what I remember of how the maps are created, they also do look at whether there's local data related to the relationship between temperature, precip, and whether greenness or even biomass. And so I know that the way they produce these relationships may differ depending on the available data. So part of potential expansion to other regions also includes working with our university partners to see what kinds of data are available, whether for setting up those relationships in terms of temperature, precip, and biomass, or evaluation.
Yeah.
So I know, for example, they were thinking about working with folks at Oklahoma State University because they have that biomass data available that could be used for evaluation. Yeah, but I can't specifically tell you how they've done that, but I could link you with the right one. But I know they thought about that.
No, it's great. And it's really interesting, for offices like ours who make a seasonal forecast, the traditional meteorology metrics are things like temperature, precip, really simple. And so we often don't evaluate with the kind of information that people would actually use. So how well it's actually working to support those applications is actually super useful. So that like two-way exchange of information of what people are finding, that's super interesting. So,
that's a good point. Yeah, sure. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the stakeholder experience in communicating uncertainty. This is a conversation that's coming up in multiple areas, including things like fires. Right? We want people increasingly want to use those kinds of projections to communicate fire risk, but you have to be very careful. So even some of the feedback that you're getting from, I don't understand this, or you have to tweak how you explain it, I think is wonderful to, keep a dialogue open about it. Yeah.
I thought you'd you were like Grasscast. Yeah, if I had an extra slide.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay, any other final questions, comments, either in the chat or you can unmute yourself? If not, I don't see any questions. So everything is clear. Thank you to Elliot Campbell at Maryland DNR. He provided the link to the saltwater intrusion report.
Thank you.
That you mentioned. The link is there on the chat box. So thank you, Elliot. So I want to thank again Julian for coming in. I want to mention to the people that are still online, the plan is to keep doing this hybrid. So hopefully you can come, the people that want to come that are here, you can come here. Even if you are not an SI employee or contractor, you can reach out to me and you can come for the talks or meetings in the days that we do the talks. Remember that September 26th to the 28th, we're gonna have the CMS Science Team meeting here in Washington, D.C. It's gonna be in person. It's gonna be hybrid. There's gonna be a remote option. But very important, on day one, we're going to have a stakeholder workshop, a couple of panels with stakeholders, a couple of panels of interest regarding COP27 and interagency priorities on carbon monitoring. So that should be interesting. Registration is open. You can just visit our website, carbon.nasa.gov, and we'll see all you next month. We're going to have, I think, September 14th is going to be the next talk. We'll send an email. We're going to post the slides and the recording of today's talk in the website, and then we'll send an email about the next talk. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you to Julian for coming in, and see you all soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That worked out well.
Great.
I'm gonna.
How many people?